videos for this. And we're going to introduce, this is the first one. We're going to look at the Enlightenment. As you see the backdrop, you see a pretty fancy salon. It's a little bit fancier than I think some of the salons were. But again, you see the meeting of the minds there. These are all different philosophes. You see the woman to the left. That's one of the madams that you talked about in the power map the other day. You see space, but again, these are just intellectuals. If you kind of peruse through with your visual, you see both bourgeois and nobility. This would be like the what you might call the woke nobility, the nobility that feel like there needs to be change. But think about what they're talking about. In the end, these philosophers, they're really going to be the ones that are the kind of the cool, hip minds, the enlightened thinkers. And they're going to use reason to challenge absolutism, mercantilism, the estate system, and the French Catholic Church. These are the four things, the four obstacles to progress that France looks at. And these are the philosophers. They're looking to England. A little bit later, they'll be looking to the United States, right? Because in 1776 with the Revolution, I hope you guys have already realized that the American Revolution is a product of the Enlightenment. I hope that makes sense. But the philosophers are trying to utilize reason to do this. So when we look at that, we know that during the Enlightenment, here's another philosophe, another salon image. It's kind of a cool image. You see a bourgeois guy with his hand up speaking with the other nobility. But during the Enlightenment, the bourgeoisie sought to shift the paradigm. We know that the bourgeoisie funded the philosophers to create philosophies on society, politics, economics, and religion. I hope this makes sense. I hope you can connect this to the Renaissance, right? Think about it. The Renaissance is a smaller scale, if you will. But remember, the Medici was paying Ficino and Pico and the others to create that new paradigm. Well, the Enlightenment in Paris is going to be broader. It's going to be a larger scope. The philosophers will use reason to challenge that traditional paradigm. That's why sometimes the Enlightenment is called the Age of Reason. Many modern ideologies, such as republicanism and capitalism that we know today, develop out of this. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, guys. So we kind of see the introduction, and this is going to be the first. I'm going to stop the video after this one. But think about it. We're looking at the challenges of absolutism, and we're going to talk about Montesquieu, Rousseau, and a guy named Beccaria. I'll tell you what page to look up Beccaria. Beccaria is kind of interesting. But these are the three guys I'm just going to utilize to illustrate. These are my three P3s that I'm going to illustrate that absolutism is greatly challenged. The philosophy view on absolutism. The divine right theory was arbitrary without reason. And I do need to make sure you put that word in your vocabulary. Make sure you learn how to spell it. Arbitrary without reason. Philosophers believe anything outside of reason was arbitrary. Things that were created just for reasons unknown. So they rejected arbitrary ideas. So the divine right theory is arbitrary. Who determines who God chose to be king? They didn't think that was correct. Plus, we already know Bishop Hussein had written his philosophy at the time of Louis XIV, and it was more of a justification of absolutism. The king's power to create arbitrary law and be above law. Remember Bodin? Bodin said king should be able to create whatever law, whatever he wants to do it, and that law does not apply to him. So the king's power to create created a body that was corrupt. There was no accountability. So remember, what do we say? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the singular nature of absolutism gave too much power to one person, one body. So we look at these things and we already know, we've seen it in the developments. So again, we see it with the Valois dynasty, we see it with the Bourbon dynasty, that intellectuals are going to be like, wait a minute, do we want one guy to have all this power? Well, the first one is Baron Montesquieu. Montesquieu's really an interesting guy. He's a noble, but he would be definitely what we consider a liberal noble at the time. And Montesquieu writes the most important book of his career, The Spirit of Laws. And The Spirit of Laws is a political treatise that examines several types of government. He looked at absolutism, he looked at republicanism, he looked at democracy. And he kind of pondered what was the best version of government. And he drew a conclusion that there's a natural order of government that's based on the separation of powers. Fun fact, he thought England had separation of powers. They really don't. But again, he concluded, he saw what he wanted to see. And what he said is there's three jobs of government. And what are the three jobs of government? To execute laws, to legislate laws, and to judge laws. So what he decided to do was, hey, these three jobs need three separate branches. They're separate but equal. And think about it. And you guys know this from sixth grade and some maybe another class, but you have checks and balances that were the natural laws that maintain the balance. These natural checks. So what he's done, he's concluded that really republicanism is the best form of government, where you have representatives at the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. This was a direct dig at Louis XIV's statement, I am the state. Think about it. When Louis XIV, during the 17th century, said, I am the state, he said he embodied all three of those jobs. Now we're in the early 18th century, and Montesquieu's going, no, that's bad. It's corrupt. One single person can't do all three things. They can't be objective in doing their job. So Spirit of Laws directly undermined the concept of absolutism because he believed there needs to be three branches of government. Now let's look at Rousseau's Social Contract. This may, in fact, be the most confusing book. When you get to college and you read it, it's one of the most confusing books of all. The fun fact is the Spark Notes or whatever review guide you use is typically twice as long as the book. So the Spark Notes is actually longer than the actual book because there's so much complication. But what does Rousseau's Social Contract say? Again, clearly it's connected to Locke. You've heard of Locke. You've heard about the social contract theory. Rousseau really delves into this. He creates this concept of popular sovereignty. He believes that the government power is derived from the people, and he penned the name popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty means the government power is derived from the people. And again, he's attacking it directly on the divine right theory. Rousseau is not necessarily opposed to absolutism, but what he's opposed is arbitrariness. He thinks the divine right theory does not represent the will of the people, but the will of what he would call the so-called God. He developed this term called the general will. And the general will, it can be really complicated, but the general will determines. So the general will is the group of people collectively who step out of the state of nature into this new civilization, and they choose the government. I will tell you, Rousseau never says revolution is good. He actually says, no, once the general will is established, it is established for all future generations. So it can be a little confusing. But what he said is the general will determines the direction of government. Is it going to be an aristocracy? Is it going to be a merchant oligarchy? Or is it going to be absolutism? He said the general will about the good for the people, and the king, oh gosh, I need to reword that. But the general will is about the good for the people. It's supposed to be about the good for the people. And the king rules for the good of the dynasty. See, think about that. So the general will is supposed to be good for the people. So even if people disagree with it, the general will is supposed to take into account for the people. But we've already discussed, when we look at this arbitrary king that the French have, absolutism based on divine right theory, the king is, since there's no general will established, there's no social contract, the king rules for the good of his dynasty. We saw it with the Italian Wars, and we see this with the wars of Louis XIV. Fun fact, because Rousseau never defined what the general will was or the type of government that best represents the general will, he could be the father of modern anarchy, modern totalitarianism, modern democracy, modern republics, etc. If you are into political philosophy, Social Contract may in fact be the first book you want to read. It's a short read, page-wise, could be a little complicated, but in this end, I want to conclude. Rousseau's concept of the general will becomes a basis for social contract. It is an opposite attack. It's an attack of the divine right theory, and he believes that the government should represent the good for the people. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are good. And I hope you notice that when you're reading, because Dr. Spivogel does a good job. If somebody's on the outside of the general will, the government can force them into it. So we'll talk more about that. But again, for the point of this, I want to point out Rousseau's social contract attacks the divine right theory because he believes coming out of the state of nature, the people derived using popular sovereignty the type of government. This was based on this concept of general will. And the general will is supposed to be for the good of the people rather than ruling for the good of itself. Rousseau's social contract clearly attacked French absolutism. Now, Beccaria, you don't have this one in your power map, so you may want to add him. Duh. You may want to actually see the page a little bit later on the PowerPoint. But he wrote a book called On Crimes of Punishment. He argued against the arbitrary royal laws and punishment. He was witnessing arbitrary torture, arbitrary death, executions, arbitrary. He looked at one where he wrote about that a teenager was killed because he stole a loaf of bread. Does that seem to be appropriate crime for the punishment or punishment for the crime? And I hope you guys realize that seems to be harsh or draconian. He believed draconian just means really harsh, arbitrarily harsh punishments that didn't serve any purpose except to bring joy to the people, maybe a spectacle for people to watch. But in the end, he says they serve no purpose. He did believe that law should be derived rationally developed. He wanted a rational laws in which they made sense to the people. He also believed that punishment should serve as deterrence and rehabilitation. The whole point of a punishment is to correct society. So if all we do is roll somebody out and cut their heads off, well, it's clearly not the deterrent or rehabilitation. People are there for the spectacle. His beliefs were focused on undermining the arbitrary royal edicts and the spectacularly cruel punishment system. And again, I would definitely, if I were you, look at page 529 and kind of read about Beccaria. But Beccaria, what I want to point out, because he viewed laws as needing to be rational, that means justified through reason. The concept of royal edicts is arbitrary, are outside of reality. He opposed the death penalty for most crimes, and he believed that crime and punishment should help better society. So that's what we see, guys. So when we look at that, I'm going to back up. So what we see here, guys, we see three philosophes. We see Montesquieu, Rousseau, Beccaria. I've packaged their books. They're the three P3s. I've identified how they ultimately challenge. We got Beccaria, who challenged the idea that the power should be in one body. We argued in the social contract that Rousseau challenged the divine right theory as arbitrary. And we now look at Beccaria as he challenged the ideas of royal edicts. Each of these three things are meant to undermine royal absolutism. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, you know what to do. You should write your question on the page. All right. With that, we are done with the 13-minute video.